Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the awesome books that I read in October. Awesome is a generalization, but for the most part I read some really great books in October, some new favorites for sure, and I'm very excited to share with you. Firstly, I picked up the second volume of The Wicked and the Divine. The Wicked and the Divine. This graphic novel series basically takes place in this sci-fi world. It's basically London, but in this London there's a set of 12 gods that is reincarnated every 90 years, and they only live for 2 years, and in that period they become basically like pop stars, like the icons of the time, and people just kind of flock to them, and there's fan clubs and everything. And anyways, our main character, Laura, is one of the many fangirls of these icons, and she accidentally gets roped into their politics and chaos ensues. What I really love about this series is the art style is very vibrant. It's very eye-catching, and I think almost everybody would enjoy it. It feels like you're watching an action movie, but in a graphic novel. Here's a sample of how realistic and crisp looking the art is, but the colors. Anyways, this second installment was really good. I thought that the plot twists were great. They definitely elevated this series for me to a whole new level, so I am excited to continue it. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which is a nonfiction book about sleep, you guessed it. And maybe I learned why we sleep, which is crazy because who would have thought you could learn that from this book? I highly recommend this book to anybody. It doesn't even matter if you are curious about sleep. I think you should be curious about sleep if you aren't. And you should read this book however you want to. I mean, there's a great British guy narrating it as the audiobook, and the physical book has cool diagrams for you to look at, so no matter what way you read it, I think you're going to gain a lot from it. This book is really logically structured. I felt like everything fell into place pretty easily. It was very accessible. It wasn't a nonfiction book that felt too sciencey or too over the head of the common person. I think anybody could read this book and still get the same amount out of it. I think that Matthew Walker did not info dump in any way. He is a very good writer, not just an information transferer. He was able to turn a study, an article, into kind of an anecdote to explain a point within his narrative. Anyways, I came out of this book with the utmost importance placed on 8 hours of sleep a night, and now every time I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I'm just disappointed in myself, and that's a good thing because that's just having standards for my sleep and health as a human being. So this book was fascinating, and I highly recommend it to literally everybody. Next, I read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is a classic that escaped me for a long time. I feel like most people had to read this in school. I never did. So I wanted to read it because it's one of my boyfriend's favorite classics. So I felt that if he's read it 5 times, I could probably read it once and see what it's all about and talk to him about it. And I was not disappointed. This book is wonderful. This book obviously takes place in a world that's dystopian, and rather than fighting fires, the firefighters in this world are tasked with burning books. And so our main character, Montag, is one of those firefighters, and he just begins to question why after meeting a girl named Clarice who just asks him questions, and he's like, why have I not thought before? So this book has really great insights about complacency and about how societies can so quickly tap in only to the human desire for movement or motion rather than allowing ourselves to feel everything in the moment and to make decisions based on our emotions. And of course, it's about the value of books, and I think any reader can really connect to it on that level because I think books are pretty cool. And maybe some people would agree with me, I don't know. Next, I read my favorite book of the year so far. I loved it so much, and that is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. I had a feeling I would love this, but I didn't think it would be this much. This book is truly something. It genre bends so many different things. It's about a high school field hockey team in the town of Danvers, Massachusetts, which is where the Salem witch trials took place once upon a time. And this field hockey team starts to tap into dark magic to try and win their games. But above all, it's a coming of age story, and it's funny. It's so funny, and just absolutely packed with detail in every single line. You just gotta take your time with this book because it has so much to give, and you just have to let it give you everything. And that's it. This book gave me everything. Also, the author went to this high school, which is a cool little tidbit. It's actually her on the back. Next, I read Sheets by Brenna Thumler. This was another buddy read with Abby. And this was the perfect, wholesome Halloween read. If you want like Halloween vibes, but not the actual spooky, like you don't actually want to be spooked, then you should read this book because it did that for me. It's about a young girl named Marjorie who runs her family laundromat. And this ghost named Wendell, and he was a boy who died too young, and he's in the land of the ghosts, but then he ventures back to the land of the humans, and he meets Marjorie, and they maybe become friends. I don't know. The art in here is gorgeous. The colors just feast for your eyes. Like, they're just so beautiful. And yep, I just like to stare at these pages. They're just great. Next, I won't dwell on this book, but I read From Bad to Cursed by Katie Allender, which is the sequel to Bad Girls Don't Die, which is a young adult horror series about a girl named Alexis. In the first book, her sister gets possessed. And I did enjoy the first book. It scared me, which it probably shouldn't have, but it scared me. I mean, it is what it's supposed to do, technically. And this one didn't really have that effect on me. I listened to the audiobook, but honestly, the characters are pretty shallow, and it just felt like everybody was making the same mistakes they made in the first book, which I thought they should have learned a lesson after how badly the first book went. So yeah, if you want to see growth in characters, maybe don't pick up the sequel to this first book, but it wasn't bad. It was not an awful book. I was somewhat entertained throughout, so that's something. And finally, I read The Dead Emcee Scrolls by Saul Williams, which is one of my friend's favorite poets, so he lent me this poetry collection as an introduction to Saul Williams. And this is an interesting one because Saul Williams basically discovered an empty spray paint can full of these scrolls that he spent 7 years of his life deciphering, and that's what's in this volume, is what he deciphered from those scrolls. And then in the last quarter of the book, it's Saul Williams' original writings that he put down during the time that he was transcribing these scrolls. The actual scrolls themselves flow really well. They read more of like a rap than a traditional poem, I would say, which makes sense because a lot of the content is related to hip-hop culture. There's also a lot dealing with like the contrast between urban and rural settings and how those settings can affect the content that is produced in them. And in terms of Saul's writing himself in the end of this book, it made me really want to pick up more of his poetry collections because he was just with it in some of them. It definitely didn't feel like the same writing style as the first portion of the book. It felt a little bit less structured than the first part. Just the poetry was a little bit freer, a little bit looser. And yeah, anyways, as a whole, this book was great. It was so interesting. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hope this convinces you to pick up some of these cool books because they're pretty cool. I'd love to hear if you've read anything good recently, and yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.